Timini awoke to the sharp vibration of his phone, its incessant buzz shattering the early morning silence. Groggily, he grabbed it, only to see a stream of missed calls and frantic messages from investors, lawyers, and business partners. His pulse quickened as the subject lines jumped out at him. Urgent, project collapse, account suspended, repossession notice. The air around him seemed to thicken. "This has to be a mistake," he muttered, throwing on a shirt and rushing out the door. By the time he arrived at his office, chaos awaited. His assistant, usually calm and collected, looked pale and jittery. She held a stack of papers with trembling hands. "Sir, it's bad," she stammered. "Really bad." "Just tell me," Timini barked, his frustration spilling over. "Morenik," she said, barely above a whisper. "She's assumed ownership of everything. The accounts, the properties, all of it. She filed the transfer documents. They're legal, sir." The words hit him like a physical blow. His knees buckled, and he braced himself against the edge of the desk. "No, this can't be happening," he rasped, his voice hollow. But it was. The assistant handed him the stack of legal documents, each one bearing his signature, each one a piece of his empire he had unknowingly handed over. Timini's mind raced. How? How could she have done this? Desperation clawed at him as he sped home, his thoughts a jumbled mess of disbelief and fury. The mansion that had always been a symbol of his power now felt cold and lifeless. The staff scattered at the sight of him, their heads lowered, their movements hurried. He stormed up the grand staircase, the weight of betrayal pressing on his chest. Entering the master bedroom, he froze. There she was, Moreniki. She sat by the window, bathed in the soft morning light, her posture calm and poised. Her face betrayed no emotion as she turned to face him. "You destroyed me," Timini spat, his voice shaking with anger. "You took everything." Moreniki stood slowly, her gaze steady. "No, Timini," she said coolly. "I didn't destroy you. I taught you a lesson." "A lesson?" His voice rose, laced with bitterness. "You call this a lesson? You ruined my life." Moreniki stepped closer, her expression unflinching. "No, Timini," she repeated, her tone firmer. "You ruined your own life. Your arrogance, your greed, and the way you treated people, especially women, made this inevitable. I didn't take anything from you that you didn't hand me on a silver platter. You trusted me because you underestimated me, just like you underestimated everyone else." Her words sliced through him, leaving him raw and exposed. For the first time, Timini found himself truly speechless. The weight of her truth crashed down on him like a tidal wave. Moreniki's voice softened, but her gaze remained steely. "Maybe next time you'll learn to value people instead of using them." Defeated and hollow, Timini packed his bags the next day. The drive back to Imor felt like a march of shame. As the SUV rolled into the village, the once adoring whispers of the villagers were replaced with murmurs of pity. "He's lost everything," they said, shaking their heads. Mama Bakara greeted him at the door, her face a mix of sorrow and resolve. She pulled him into a tight embrace, but her words were sharp and clear. "I warned you, my son. Pride goes before a fall, and you fell hard." Timini had no argument. His shoulders slumped as he wandered the fields aimlessly over the following days, haunted by the ghost of his former life. The mansion, the cars, the power, it all seemed like a distant dream, overshadowed by the woman who had bested him at his own game. Meanwhile, in Lagos, Moreniki was thriving. The assets she had seized from Timini became the foundation of her growing empire. She expanded her fashion business, not just nationally, but internationally, becoming a name synonymous with innovation and power. Her face graced magazine covers, and her designs walked the most prestigious runways. She was no longer the underestimated village girl. Morenike Bakare had transformed into a force that demanded respect, and she had done it on her own terms. Standing on the pinnacle of her success, Morenike Bakare was now a household name. Her designs adorned magazine covers, her brand became synonymous with elegance, and her empire expanded beyond the borders of Lagos. Yet, as she stared out of her office window, overlooking the bustling city, her thoughts strayed to the man she had left behind, Timini Bakare, the man who had underestimated her, trusted her, and ultimately handed her the tools to dismantle his empire. She had achieved her goal, proving that power could be reclaimed and respect demanded. But a question nagged at her. Was this truly the end for Timini, or was it the beginning of something greater? In Emor, Timini sat on a weathered wooden bench outside his mother's humble home. The dusty road stretched endlessly before him, and with it, the remnants of the life he had once known. The villagers' whispers followed him everywhere, a reminder of how far he had fallen. The once proud billionaire, adorned with suits and surrounded by luxury, was now a man stripped bare. Yet, in the stillness of Emor's hills, Timini began to see his arrogance for what it truly was: hollow bravado. He replayed the broken relationships, the women he had treated as conquests, and the trust he had abused. Each memory was a shard of glass cutting deeper into his pride. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, his mother joined him on the veranda. "My son," Mama Bakari said softly, her voice carrying the weight of wisdom, "you've spent enough time mourning. It's time to rebuild." Timini sighed, his head bowed. "Start over with what, Mama? I have nothing." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have your mind, your hands, and your lessons. Wealth can be rebuilt, but this time let it be with humility and respect." Her words were a spark in the darkness. That night, Timini stayed awake, sketching ideas for small businesses and reconnecting with old contacts. He still had the sharp instincts that once built an empire. He only needed to wield them differently. 3 months later, Amor buzzed with excitement as Morenike returned for her sister's wedding. She hadn't planned to see Timini but found herself drawn to the familiar market square, and there he was, standing by a stall, sleeves rolled up, helping a trader arrange baskets. He was leaner, his movements unhurried, his face lined with humility. "Timini," she called, her voice cutting through the chatter. He turned, and for a moment their eyes locked. The man who had once radiated arrogance now stood before her, grounded and unguarded. "Morenike," he said, his voice steady but softer than she remembered. The villagers watched in curiosity as Morenike gestured for them to talk privately under the shade of a large tree. Seated on the grass, Morenike studied him carefully. "You seem different." Timini nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I had to be. Losing everything showed me who I really was. Now, I'm rebuilding one step at a time." She tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "And what have you learned?" "To treat people with respect, to value those who stand by me, not those who flatter me." Her expression softened, though she masked it with a faint smile. "Good. Maybe you weren't hopeless after all." Timini leaned forward, his voice earnest. "Morenike, I know what you did was to teach me a lesson, and I deserved it. But I also know that what we shared wasn't all lies. I need you to know I'm sorry for everything." Her walls went up instinctively. "Apologies don't erase the past, Timini." "No," he said, his voice quiet yet firm. "But they can build a better future." For the first time since their marriage, Morenike felt her resolve falter. She hadn't expected this version of Timini, a man who had not only accepted his downfall but had grown from it. Morenike crossed her arms, her sharp eyes assessing him. You say you've changed, but how do I know this isn't another performance? Timini met her gaze. You don't. That's why I'm not asking for anything from you. Not your forgiveness, not your trust. I just want to prove myself, whether you're watching or not. His sincerity disarmed her. The man before her was stripped of pretense, leaving only raw honesty. Yet, her instincts told her to be cautious. I'll believe it when I see it, she said finally. Timini returned to the village with renewed determination. He began helping local traders, offering advice and connecting them with suppliers in Lagos. Slowly, he earned the respect of the villagers, not as the wealthy outsider, but as a hard-working man rebuilding his life. Morenike, back in Lagos, found herself checking on his progress more often than she cared to admit. At first, it was curiosity. Then, it became something more. The man who had once flaunted his wealth now devoted his days to empowering others. Ada, noticing her friend's frequent mentions of Timini, smirked knowingly. You're watching him too closely, Ada teased. Morenike shrugged. I'm just making sure he doesn't fool anyone again. Ada laughed. Or maybe you're hoping he doesn't. Slowly, he earned the respect of the villagers, not as the wealthy outsider, but as a hard-working man rebuilding his life. Morenike, back in Lagos, found herself checking on his progress more often than she cared to admit. At first, it was curiosity. Then, it became something more. The man who had once flaunted his wealth now devoted his days to empowering others. Ada, noticing her friend's frequent mentions of Timini, smirked knowingly. You're watching him too closely, Ada teased. Morenike shrugged. I'm just making sure he doesn't fool anyone again. Ada laughed. Or maybe you're hoping he doesn't. And if I succeed, then we'll talk. Timini extended his hand. Deal. The weeks that followed tested them both, forcing Timini to dig deep into the skills he had once taken for granted. Late nights turned into quiet conversations, and the walls between them began to crack. Timini saw the drive that had made Morenike unstoppable, while she glimpsed the man he could become. But trust was fragile, and the shadow of their past lingered, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Weeks turned into months as Timini worked tirelessly under Morenike's guidance. The project she assigned him, a clothing line aimed at empowering artisans from rural communities, was more than just a test. It was a reflection of his transformation. Timini threw himself into the work with unwavering determination, not for wealth or pride, but to prove to himself and to Morenike that he was capable of true growth. His designs blended modern aesthetics with traditional African influences, and the clothing line began to gain traction. Your work is good, Morenike admitted one evening as they reviewed the final collection. Better than I expected. Timini smiled faintly. You expected me to fail, didn't you? She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. I expected you to show me who you really are, and you did. Their partnership grew stronger as they launched the line together. The collection's success exceeded expectations, receiving praise from critics and buyers alike. Morenike watched as Timini humbly accepted accolades, no longer seeking validation, but focusing on the artisans whose lives the project had transformed. For the first time, she saw a man who understood the value of legacy, not just in wealth, but in impact. But the ghosts of their past still lingered. Crystal, Folarin, and the doubts of their critics continued to cast shadows over their newfound partnership. One day, an anonymous exposé surfaced, dredging up details of Timini's former exploits and hinting at Morenike's calculated rise to power. The media frenzy threatened to undo their progress. We should ignore it, Timini suggested, his tone calm yet firm. Morenike shook her head. Number, if we ignore it, we let others define our story. Together, they held a press conference. Standing side by side, they addressed every accusation with honesty and vulnerability. "I was once a man driven by arrogance and greed," Timini confessed to the reporters. "I hurt people and I paid the price, but that fall was my salvation. It taught me to rebuild, not with pride, but with purpose." Morenike followed, her voice steady and strong. "I am not ashamed of my journey. Yes, I fought for what I have, and yes, I made bold decisions, but I've always done so with integrity. Together, we've built something not just for ourselves, but for those who believed in us." Their authenticity resonated. Public opinion began to shift, and their critics grew silent. Months later, as they stood on the balcony of their newly rebuilt home overlooking the Lagos skyline, Timini turned to Morenike. "I've learned one thing," he said softly. "And what's that?" she asked, tilting her head. "That redemption isn't a destination, it's a journey, and I want to spend the rest of mine walking it with you." Morenike smiled, her eyes shining with quiet pride. "You've come a long way, Timini Bakare. But the journey doesn't end here." "It doesn't," he agreed, taking her hand. "But as long as we walk it together, I think we'll be fine." The years that followed saw the duo rise as one of Lagos's most admired power couples. Morenike's fashion empire expanded globally, creating opportunities for young designers across Africa. Timini's consultancy flourished, and his mentorship programs became a beacon of hope for struggling entrepreneurs. Their partnership wasn't without challenges, but they faced each one with a unity forged through fire. They built a family rooted in love, trust, and mutual respect, with Mama Bakare's wisdom guiding them through. Their story became a testament to the power of transformation, the importance of humility, and the strength of a love born not from perfection, but from perseverance. On a quiet evening in Imor, Timini and Morenike sat under the same tree where they had first reconnected. The village buzzed with life around them, and their laughter mingled with the warm breeze. Timini glanced at her, his heart full. "You know, Morenike, I used to think life was about winning, but you showed me it's about becoming." She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "And you showed me that even the proudest man can change if he's willing to try." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, they sat together, two souls who had fought, fallen, and risen again. Together, they had rewritten their destinies. Dear viewers, the story of Timini and Morenike teaches us powerful lessons about life, love, and transformation. 1. Humility is strength. No matter how high we rise, arrogance and pride can lead to our downfall. True strength lies in humility and the willingness to learn from our mistakes. 2. Growth through adversity. Timini's journey shows that failure isn't the end. It's an opportunity to rebuild, learn, and become better. 3. Partnership over power. A successful relationship is not about dominance or control, but about mutual respect, trust, and shared growth. 4. Redemption is possible. No one is beyond redemption. With sincerity, effort, and genuine change, even the most broken relationships can be mended. 5. Empowering others. Empowers you. When we lift others up, we also rise. Morenike's decision to empower artisans and Timini's mentorship programs highlight the importance of using our success to help others. To my viewers, what do you think about this thrilling conclusion to Timini and Morenike's story? Was it what you expected? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to share what lesson resonated with you the most. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications for more captivating tales. Stay inspired, stay humble, and remember, redemption is always within reach.